talk about all these other organizations and what they're doing and how they're doing it, we're convoluting what the real issue here is. The FDA that allows cigarettes to be put out, you get 500,000 people a year die from it, and they allow that to happen. But something that doesn't hurt anybody, that actually helps people, they're trying to stop it.
That's Kentucky hemp pioneer, activist, and business leader Joe Hickey talking about the FDA. This is the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. My name is Eric Herlock, and today we will be talking about the FDA, but sort of in a roundabout way. We're actually talking about hemp seed meal today. In just a few weeks, the American Association of Feed Control Officials will be voting on the new definition for hemp seed meal as a feed for commercial laying hens. And there's a lot riding on this vote, because essentially this is the beginning of cracking open that market. This will give oilseed producers a secondary market for their byproduct, the meal or the cake. It's going to give livestock farmers new options for feed. It's going to be good for everybody. It's an important first step. But what I've been seeing here in the hemp space is a lot of chatter. A lot of people have very strong opinions about the cannabinoid levels that are set by this new definition. So that's what we're talking about today. We're going to hear my conversation with Austin Therrell, Executive Director of AAFCO. Plus, I will talk to Andrew Bish, the President of the Hemp Feed Coalition. And of course, we'll check in with Joe Hickey, who you heard in the intro. So a lot of interesting information today, plus some pretty interesting opinions too. First, we're going to take a quick sponsor break, and then we'll come back and I'll talk a little bit more about what we're going to get into today, and then we're going to get into it. Our show is brought to you today with support from IND Hemp in Fort Benton, Montana, where they believe in the goodness of hemp. IND Hemp is a family-owned, mission-driven industrial hemp food, feed, and fiber company that's providing new opportunities for farmers in rural communities in Montana and across the American West. Check them out at indhemp.com. Today's show is also brought to you with support from Forever Grain, distributors of the KP4 hemp cutter. Introducing a revolution in hemp harvesting, setting a new standard for harvesting quality, speed, and efficiency, the KP4 prepares hemp for ideal retting and easy on-field tedding, raking, and baling. Easy to maintain and designed to withstand the punishments of hemp harvesting, the KP4 hemp cutter, available only at hempcutter.com. Alright, so before we get into what we're talking about today, I wanted to remind you about something cool that's coming up here in Pennsylvania, here in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, of all places. This is the Lancaster County Hemp Circuit. Hemp comes home to its roots in Lancaster County. Learn from the past, see the present, and imagine a bright future. Yeah, this is a 2-day event, August 20th and 21st. And on the first day, on August 20th, there's going to be 3 different farms that you go to. King's Agri-Seeds in the morning, and then the Landis Valley Farm Museum in the afternoon, and then the Penn State Southeast Agricultural Research and Extension Center for an evening twilight hemp walk. And then the second day, there will be a big field day event at Steve Groff's farm in southern Lancaster County, Cedar Meadow Farm. So I will have a link on the show page for this episode, possibly, definitely next week's episode. If you need more information, send me an email, because I can put you in touch with the right people. So I'll be at this event both days. I'll be interviewing people. I'll be part of it somehow. We're still figuring that out, but I'm super excited for this, and I hope to see all of you there. There will be a registration link available to you soon. I'll probably email that as soon as it's available. We'll stick it in the newsletter. Hopefully you've all signed up for our hemp newsletter at lancasterfarming.com. Alright, so we're going to get into the show today. First, we're going to hear my conversation with Austin Therrell from the American Association of Feed Control Officials. In the past couple of weeks, I have been hearing some chatter about people's opposition to this hemp seed meal definition, especially the cannabinoid limits that are pretty stringent. 2 parts per million for THC and 20 parts per million for CBD. So where do these numbers come from? What happens if AAFCO votes yes? What happens if AAFCO votes no? That's what we're going to talk to Austin about right now.
Austin Therrell, welcome to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. Could you introduce yourself for us, please?
Hey, yeah, Eric. My name's Austin Therrell. I am the executive director for the Association of American Feed Control Officials, and have been involved with the association for quite a time and been in this current role for almost 2 years now.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here. I appreciate your time. So in a few weeks, AAFCO will be voting on the ingredient definition for hemp seed meal for commercial laying hens. So that's pretty standard procedure, right? Like voting on ingredient definitions?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the big things that our association does to promote, harmonization and uniformity when it comes to defining ingredients and ingredient standards that all the state regulators across the U.S. recognize.
Right, because it's a food safety issue. That's how we keep our food supply safe, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Food safety issue and a trade issue as well. If it wasn't for, for kind of some standardization in the definition process, you'd have, 50 different states with 50 different types of definitions and ways to view the same ingredient. So that's kind of where we come in to help promote that for trade reasons as well.
So as, a hemp reporter, I hear a lot of things in the hemp industry, and some of the chatter I heard was about groups were writing in to your agency, either in favor or against this new definition. So I'm curious if that is standard too. Does your agency often hear from various interest groups?
Yeah, absolutely. As an association, we do receive quite a few letters. Our voting members definitely probably receive more though. So we do see some of the ones we're copied on and that get shared with us at the association level. But we're in a unique position where our voting members are state regulatory officials, and so they're public officials and each of their jurisdictions, and so oftentimes before votes, whether it's hemp seed meal or any kind of other definition, different trade groups or manufacturers will reach out to them ahead of those votes to kind of share their perspectives or their opinions, and we encourage that. So that process is transparent for us, and we fully expect our members do their due diligence ahead of votes. So they may receive letters, they may receive phone calls and other types of communication, and they'll have conversations within their state departments and within their own leadership to help develop their opinions and how they're going to vote.
All right. Well, I appreciate that transparency, and I'm a direct benefactor of it because I contacted your office last week and said, hey, do these letters exist? Can you share them with me? And you sent me sort of a trove of letters from various associations, international and national, who are concerned about this definition for hemp seed meal. You got letters from Canadian producers, the Federation of International Hemp Organizations, the National Hemp Association, the Australian Industrial Hemp Alliance, the Hemp Feed Coalition, the Association of Western Hemp Professionals, and the National Hemp Growers Association. And some of these letters are in support of the current ingredient definition that's been submitted by the Hemp Feed Coalition after years of work. And some letters are in opposition to the definition and are basically asking AAFCO to change the definition. At issue, of course, is cannabinoids, specifically THC and CBD. The limits there, respectively, are 2 parts per million and 20 parts per million, which those against this definition say are just too low, hard to reach. It's going to have negative repercussions to the market worldwide. Stop everything. Which seems really unproductive and unhelpful, just a few weeks before the vote. But that's beside the point. My question here is about those cannabinoid levels. Where did those numbers come from? Are they arbitrary? Is there science behind those numbers? So, where did those numbers come from?
Yeah, well, I can share some insight into that process a little bit, and yeah, they're not arbitrary in any way. If anyone, if any of your audience is curious, we have two free online courses that we have on our website. If you go to afco.org under resources, and each of those online webinar courses kind of do a deep dive into AAFCO's ingredient definition process and the different roles of our association and FDA and so on. So, when we're walking through this ingredient definition process, there is a submitter. So someone who from industry is going to put together, the data package, help craft a definition and then submit that through the process. And so, AAFCO just kind of plays a role in that. Our role in that is that we assist that submitter and making sure they have all the requirements, all the right pieces of information to submit for that scientific review. So as part of that data package, and this one in particular for hemp seed meal, we FDA and AAFCO investigators have to make determinations based off of the data that was submitted to them. So in this case, with this particular submitter, the levels that were shown in the data that was shared were very low. Whether that's related to, different type of processing methods or the methodology they use to get their final product. Those levels of THC and total CBD were very low. So, FDA, as part of their role in helping us conduct that scientific review, takes a look at the data that was shared, and then they develop some limits based off of what they were provided. And so, if someone were to provide additional data that showed different levels, maybe that those limits in this first round of the definition would have been different. But the limits were set based off of the information that was provided. So, we've certainly heard the argument from multiple sides that maybe those are some pretty tough limits to meet. Maybe they're not always attainable, but in this case, it was shown that at least this particular submitter could meet those limits, and because that's what we have in the submission. So
Right.
That's where those numbers came from, and
Okay.
FDA takes a lot of a lot of consideration into setting those. Definitely, animal food safety being number one, but then also human food safety, since this is particularly for laying hens. So we have to consider any type of compounds that might transmit through the egg as well. So there's a lot of different factors that we take into consideration when developing some of these.
Okay. So let's say there is a yes vote on August 7th. What happens then? Is it like commercial laying hens across America can now eat hemp seed meal in their rations?
Yeah. So the yes vote, yeah, absolutely. So the current process, once membership votes the initial time, the definition will move into what we call a tentative status. And so that does allow the industry to begin marketing that ingredient. And so certainly, some laying hens across the country could begin receiving that in their diets and rations. Some states, it's important to note, some states recognize definitions in a tentative status, and there are a few that don't. After 90 days of being in tentative status, the process basically, in a simple term, starts over. And a recommendation would come back through the committee and to membership again to move the tentative definition to official. That's the final step. And so all states recognize, ingredients once they're in that official status. But for all practical means, yeah, once a yes vote happens, firms in the industry could begin marketing hemp seed meal as soon as, late August into September.
Okay. Getting back to those contentious cannabinoid levels, are they set in stone, or is this ingredient definition amendable in any way? And if it is, what's that process like?
Right. It is very amenable. Eric, we like to pride ourselves in being, a science-based organization. And so with that, there's always new science that, becomes available, new information, new data. And so, nothing is ever, I like to say, written in stone, right? So there is a process where, other submitters or petitioners could offer an amendment to the definition, as soon as this fall, and that would work, that those amendments would work through the process again to potentially change that. And with that amendment, additional data would probably need to be submitted, and it would be up for, discussion and deliberation within the committee level as to whether or not those changes should be made. But it's certainly an open process, and anyone could submit those modification requests.
Okay. What if there is a no vote in August? What happens to hemp seed meal then? Does it go back to the beginning, or is there some kind of appeals process?
Right. Yeah. Essentially, yeah, it would go back to the beginning. So if membership completely voted it down, a submitter would need to start back from the beginning to, hopefully resolve any issues or concerns that our membership had that would cause it to be voted down. So I don't know if it gives you any kind of level of confidence, but in my time with AAFCO, I haven't seen that happen completely. So not to say that it can't, but
Okay.
But I think it's got a pretty good shot of moving forward.
All right. As far as commodity crops go and like oilseed crops, how important is it to have a secondary market for the byproduct, like in this case, the hemp seed meal?
I'd say that's probably more of a good, industry related question. Being on the regulatory side, I probably don't weigh into the market concerns as much, but I would say just from a sustainability, aspect, any kind of different avenue to make a profit would be great for any type of ingredient.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So if hemp seed meal is approved, does that make it easier for other categories of livestock to gain approval for hemp seed meal in their diets?
Yeah, I think so. It's not a black and white answer for sure, because when you talk about different species of livestock animals, we're talking about different life stages, different digestive tracts, and so a lot of times there is a lot of different data points that need to be considered, and what it is being reviewed for laying hens may not be what's required for dairy cattle and so on. And so it's not black and white, but generally speaking, if a submitter sticks to very similar processing methods that may have been submitted in the first data packet, methodologies and sampling methods and all that follow suit, sometimes that does help speed up that secondary review to add additional species onto a definition. So
Okay.
I think it does help in some ways.
Okay. So could you say that it validates the methodology?
Yeah, and I mean, not necessarily validates, but maybe if similar methods or processing methods are used, then the reviewers that are looking at the data know, hey, we've already reviewed this once. It's the same method, same methodologies here. We don't necessarily need to spend as much time on it the second go round as we did the first.
All right. So getting back to those letters from the various, interest groups, do they ever have sway?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I don't know if sway is the right word, but I will say, and I was previously a state regulator before I was in this current role with AAFCO, and so if I kind of take a step back and put that hat on for a minute, I always took on before a vote would happen or before moving on to an AAFCO annual or mid-year meeting, I would read through any letters that I received as a state regulator. I would take any phone calls, respond to emails, and try and really develop, a pretty thorough understanding of what I'm voting on. And I can say that is the case for all of our voting members. They all kind of do their due diligence there. So I think arguments and letters and communication definitely help. At the end of the day, our state members are going to vote, representing the wishes of their state. And I think that that's the best way to do that. But I think having additional information from some of the trade groups or people that are within the industry that are dealing with these type of ingredients on a day-to-day basis, that perspective helps to inform those decisions a lot.
All right. So I know you're busy. I'll let you get back to work, but is there anything else that you want to share with our audience, either about the work you do there at AAFCO or anything about this hemp seed meal ingredient vote in particular?
Well, I think that, for those that are maybe not aware of AAFCO, the work that our state members do on behalf of, farmers and the animal food industry in general is really important. Anyone, if you want to find out more about us, you can find us at AAFCO.org. We're pretty transparent. We share a lot of information on there, a lot of training opportunities, and all of our meetings and different events are open to everyone. So if anyone's curious kind of how the cheese or the sausage is made in the animal food world, you're welcome to come and attend and be a part of it.
Austin Therrell, Executive Director of the American Association of Feed Control Officials. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks, Eric.
All right, so now we're going to hear my interviews with Andrew Bish from the Hemp Feed Coalition and Joe Hickey from Kentucky. And before we get into this, I feel like I need to give you a little more background information. So you heard me talking to Austin about these letters that were sent in. There was one letter in particular that gave me pause. There were some red flags, some things that caught my eye, some things that, didn't pass the smell test, really. And I don't want to dwell too much on it. I just want to shine a light on it and say, look, there's somebody doing something that looks sneaky or shady. And it feels like it's undermining work that other people are doing, working towards a goal that I think all of us have, which is to open up these markets. Anyway, the letters that AAFCO sent me, I have published on the show page for this episode at lancasterfarming.com, so you can go there, click on the PDFs, you can read all the letters. They're full of great information and also some red flags. So, like I said, I'm not going to dwell too much, but this one letter from the National Hemp Growers Association had some issues, and I talked to some of the people who signed that letter, including Joe Hickey, and I reached out to other people who signed that letter, but I have not heard back from them. I have been trying to get comment from the board of this association, and I talked to Joe Hickey. He was a signer of the letter. He's listed as VP of membership. I spoke to the man who's listed as the treasurer, and he was not even aware that this letter was going out, and he has different views on it and is actually a signer on a letter in support of HFC's ingredient definition. So it's complicated, it's messy. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I just want to shine a light on it, and I don't know, I'm trying to adhere to these three principles that a wise friend of mine told me. He said, be open, don't judge, but have an opinion. And I am open. I am very open. I am giving the benefit of the doubt to everybody, right? But I'm trying not to judge either, right? Like, these actions are neither good nor bad. I'm not sure, but I do have an opinion. All right, well, here's Andrew Bish from the Hemp Feed Coalition.
The whole thing is obviously frustrating. The situation with another organization popping up, I find that personally just to be aggravating, because there's so little resources within the industry. I feel like those that are going out and trying to find ways to further segment the industry are not on the right side of the industry, even if they have the right intentions. I don't think that the action matches up with if the intention is right. Now, yeah. This particular issue, it's glaringly obvious what this organization was doing, and I don't know. I guess I don't understand I don't understand how it wasn't going to be recognized that it was obviously set up for this purpose. I mean, because you just don't have to dig very far to sort this out. So that itself is just silly. I think the most frustrating part about all of this is that a lot of what the arguments against the application are things that the Hemp Feed Coalition doesn't disagree with. I think in general, we recognize a lot of these challenges, a lot of these constraints. What I don't understand is the energy put towards the Hemp Feed Coalition and undermining the Hemp Feed Coalition and the AAFCO process, when clearly the energy could be spent towards influencing the FDA, which would be the route you'd want to take if you wanted to solve this. Because at the end of this, any of the things that they're asking for, the FDA just simply is not going to honor. So it's not a situation where, the Hemp Feed Coalition says, hey, you know what, we saw what this group had to say, and we're going to go back and change the application, and then all will be well. All will not be well. All will not be well at all. The FDA is going to look at that, and they're going to say, look, we've been talking to you for the last 3 years, and you are crazy. You know what has been said. You've been in these conversations. And these are the expectations, and you don't have the criteria to adjust this. And we don't feel like we are not in a place to be flexible on this. So what you're going to get is you're going to get nothing. And is that what you want? And the answer, of course, would be no. But I'm not sure that's what I don't think these other groups understand, is how damaging to the industry this is going to be if we get nothing. Now, the only legitimate concern that I've seen out of all of this that should cause anyone consternation would be the Canadians and their concern that the Canadian regulators are going to somehow adopt FDA provisions once we pass this. I can't speak to that. And like I said to the people in Canada, your process is different than ours. And if Canada Health goes down this road of adopting FDA provisions, and you have data in the application that you're going to produce that varies from the data that we produce, that would be unfortunate, but it's not something that we can control. And to think that, if you take that another step, to think that if the Canadians are able to approve different limits and that the FDA is going to care at all, that is a fallacy. They just will not. We're going to be in the exact same position, just at a different time, and the market will continue to be stifled until we get to that time.
Is there precedent in, Canadian politics of what do you call it, Canada Health adopting FDA policies?
Well,
that just seems lazy. Can't they do their own work?
Well, what they want to go to, I actually can't answer that. I mean, if you look at it, there's a patchwork of, if we just stick to the hemp industry for a second, there's a patchwork of rules and regulations throughout the world, right? So to think that the Hemp Feed Coalition is somehow going to unite all of this patchwork of rules and regulations through this chicken feed application is really a very lofty goal.
Yeah.
And completely unlikely. But what they like to point to is the 0.3% THC rule that has been adopted around the world as a result of Canadian research. And I'll give them that did happen. I don't see why that would happen here. And furthermore, when you look at this further, all this applies to is egg-laying chickens. It's not a rule on animal feed and the cannabinoid limits on animal feed. This is an animal feed rule relative to egg-laying chickens. We anticipate, when we get into beef cattle, when we get into the horses, that there's going to be entirely different limits. And we have data to support those other limits that we believe that the FDA will take into consideration. For instance, and the number one problem here is the FDA is concerned that, I don't even know if they're concerned, so that's not a fair statement. But what they claim is that because they haven't set a safe human standard for cannabinoid intake, then whatever you feed a human has to register as 0 parts. Basically, it's got to be non-detectable. Non-detectable is what the words that they use. That's the specific language that the FDA uses. Well, people don't eat horses. So, well, at least in the United States that we know
Right.
of,
They look delicious though, don't they?
yes. We are not serving horse meat in the United States to American citizens commercially. So with that being said, the limits on that will vary because it's not going into human food consumption. It's likely that we're going to be able to feed higher limits. And then there's a lot of data that K-State did on cattle that gives us some ideas on how much cannabinoids are likely to be able to be fed and also show up non-detectable in the meat.
Yeah.
And we're going to get that data on chickens later when we have a market for it and we have a lot more chickens being produced. It's going to be a lot cheaper and easier to do that study. Yeah. So I think the whole thing is it's just blown out of proportion for no real good reason. And like I said, the only people that really have a concern here are the Canadians relative to the influence that it could cast on Canada Health. And we don't even know that that is a thing that they're going to do.
There were other letters sent in, like from FIHO, the Federation of International Hemp Organizations. There was one from the Australian Hemp Association. And it seemed like a cookie cutter letter, like everybody got the same thing and they sent it in. All of the international letters had charts with data and numbers and whatnot. The letter from the National Hemp Growers Association, that was just all words. It didn't have much data. But it's just a strange thing, at least to me anyway. I mean, I've not followed AAFCO procedures before, but do you think this is a normal thing for advocacy groups to send in letters right before a vote?
No, not at all. As a matter of fact, typically the industry itself doesn't submit applications to AAFCO. The way that it works is a corporation, a company that has a financial interest in a particular feed ingredient submits an application, and the industry itself doesn't engage in it because that's not for the industry usually to engage in. Now, partially because most of these ingredients were legal prior to 1958, and as a result, they're legal today. So a lot of commodities just didn't have this hurdle, but it is very abnormal for the industry to be even invested in a particular application. What I think is a little bit disheartening is that there's a lot of people very, very interested in this, and not in a good way, but also not supporting what would need to be done to accomplish their own ends. And so, it's one thing for people that have thrown a lot of time, effort, money into something to say, look, this isn't how we want it. This isn't what we want. It's a completely different thing for parties that have had little to no engagement and no investment to then shout from the rooftops that, well, this isn't what we want. And it's like, well, okay, well, then go put in your own application. Well, we're not going to do that. We're just going to sit there and we're going to throw rocks at your application. And it just seems like a very unproductive use of time and resources.
And it seems like, I mean, I know for a fact that the Hemp Feed Coalition did not develop all of that in secret, in a vacuum, in a dark closet. You guys were very open about what you were doing, right? You were seeking public input, and you were trying to raise money to help pay for it. So it's like everyone kind of knew what was happening over there at HFC, at least from
I don't recall where people have been approaching us at the Hemp Feed Coalition and we've been denying information. I don't recall where people have attempted to join the organization and we've asked and we've decided not to have them join. There just is not an agenda from the HFC to not be transparent. But I mean, we are somewhat limited in our transparency to our supporters because we do feel like the data that we have has value, and we do want people to support the organization to be able to access that. that data. But when asked direct questions, to my knowledge, we've consistently given direct answers and supported those answers with data.
Okay. What kinds of criticisms have HFC received? Like, what have you heard from people?
Well, I would say that the strongest criticism is that we are going to destroy the Canadian hemp industry. That this act is, the Canadians have no market for animal feed right now, but if the market opens up to 50% of their material, that's going to bring down the Canadian hemp industry. That's probably the most outlandish claim that I've heard thus far. You know, I'm glad that you asked. I've got this fancy document that we put together.
Okay.
That actually highlights all of the concerns. So concern number one, commercially available hemp seed meal cannot meet the FDA's requirement for cannabinoid content of, hold on, I gotta.
You should send that document to me and I can post it.
Yeah. I will do that right after this.
Okay.
It cannot meet the FDA's requirement for cannabinoid content of 2 parts per million total THC and 20 parts per million total CBD. So that's false. We say that we can meet those standards with 85% confidence. Our own internal data shows 93% pass rate.
Okay.
So that's pretty impressive. Now, what I will admit to is that it varies from what the Canadians have for data. And now why that is, I can't speak to that. I mean, maybe there's some varietal differences that they're using in Canada. Maybe there's 1,000 potential reasons that nobody has started to look into yet as to why we're seeing less cannabinoids in our hemp seeds versus the Canadians. I don't know the answer.
And let's just a good time to bring up that there's no actual cannabinoids being produced in the seed. It's all just a contamination issue on the outer shell because the seed develops in the flower. That's where the cannabinoids are. So none of this is about the actual composition of the seed, but what might be on the outer casing of the seed, right?
That's correct. And the Canadians even acknowledge that most of their material will meet the THC threshold of 2 parts per million. It's the CBD threshold that actually is a little bit challenging for the Canadians, and they may only achieve, they're saying that they're only going to achieve a 50% pass rate. Maybe that's true, maybe that's not true. But just so you're aware, the way that the cannabinoids get into the seed meal is because that shell that has we'll call it contamination, in this situation is pressed with the screw press. The oil is naturally flowing over the outside of the shell, and so it just happens to pick up some of those cannabinoids that are on the outside of the shell and then carried into the oil and into the meal through that pressing process. So that's kind of how that occurs.
Yeah.
The second thing that people are saying is once the definition is approved, it can never be changed or adjusted. And that's
not what I heard at all. I heard something completely different than that. Correct.
And the way that we know that's not true is not because we say it's not true, although that'd be nice if everything we said was true. We went to the FDA on 3 different occasions to ask them this question before we agreed to pursue this definition with the FDA. We wanted to make sure that we were not set in stone. They confirmed with us that this process is iterative. It's designed to be changed as data presents itself. So if we can go back to the FDA, and this is actually the tough part. This is what the FDA said, and this is why what the Canadians, what all these groups want us to do is not as easy as just saying, look, we're going to run another study. Now, what they want us to do for a study is they said, look, in order for us to trust this at a higher limit, you're going to have to go out and you're going to have to find hemp seed meal. You're going to have to produce hemp seed meal that contains over 50 parts per million CBD. Well, we don't have a lot of data that shows that there's that anywhere. So that's going to be a challenge. We're gonna potentially have to grow a variety of hemp seeds that happens to be unusually high in cannabinoid transferred in transferred cannabinoids, or I don't know, maybe we take the seeds and we douse them in cannabinoids. I don't know what the heck we're going to have to do. It's going to be complicated.
Just don't clean them. Just throw them in with the flowers. Like just put the buds and the seeds in and see how much cannabinoid content's in there.
Yeah, maybe that's what we'll have to do. We don't know exactly how to conduct that study because what they're asking for just isn't readily available in the marketplace. But that's what they want. They don't want just another study. They want a study of high cannabinoid material showing that it's going to be safe. So it's going to be a little bit more complex than just going out there and doing another study. And that's part of the reason we are of the opinion that we just have to open up the marketplace so that the funding to support that type of study is going to be available. And in the meantime, let's allow the 80+% of the hemp seed meal that's available to go into the market and let it be sold to animals. Now, one of the concerns that people also raise, and this isn't on my list of concerns, but they say things like, well, if it doesn't meet those thresholds, then it's going to be wasted. Well, let's be honest about ourselves or with ourselves on this. So what's happening right now is that all of the hemp seed that's being produced in the United States, which is almost none, has to be used in human grade food. And did you know that there is a healthy percentage of that does not qualify for human grade food? So what do we do with that? Well,
birds. We eat it, feed it to the birds.
Well, that's illegal.
Darn.
Well, it's illegal to do commercially, right? So, but that's wasted material. So it's not like material is not being wasted now. What we're actually doing is opening up a secondary market for human grade food. And that's what one of the intentions of this was to do, is to open up that secondary market, because there's a lot of this material sitting. If you go to an IND Hemp, you go to a Healthy Oilseeds, you go to a Victory, you go to Dakota, wherever you go, you're going to find that they have a bunch of material that they can't get rid of from a hemp seed meal standpoint, because consumers are just not picking it up at the levels that we'd like them to see, and partially because we don't have enough volume, right? So there's not enough volume, so the prices of the consumer cost is very high. The cost to animals is very high. It's a very big volume problem. We got to get the market to open up, to start bringing more volume, to start lowering those costs. And it's not going to happen overnight. That's one of the things that Joe Hickey says. He's like, well, it costs too much. And I said, yeah, absolutely. But if it's going to cost too much forever if we don't open the marketplace right now, if we get it open, maybe in 2-3 years, we start to become a little bit more competitive. And especially as genetics start to get introduced from companies like Newest Genetics that raise the amount of seeds per acre, those costs go down. So anyway, concern number 3, there's no laboratories available to detect to the extent the FDA is requiring to the proposed levels.
I've heard that.
Well, I don't see how this is the Hemp Feed Coalition's problem in terms of we aren't advocating for what the FDA is requiring us to do. This is something that the FDA said that they have to have non-detectable. So you have to have a lab that can measure below 1 part per million.
Sounds like a business opportunity for someone, right?
Absolutely.
Like, oh, there's not enough labs? Let's start some new labs.
Absolutely. And I think one of the mistakes that we made is this would be an area where I think that we made a mistake. And it's not an actual mistake in terms of a process, but maybe we made a mistake in terms of communication. So when we went out there, we said, look, Eurofins can test this. And so some of the kickback we got back was, well, we can't just have it to where only Eurofins is available to test it. So what we did was we went and did a little bit of research, not extensive research, but a reasonable amount of research to say, what are there labs out there outside of Eurofins that can test down below 1 part per million? Believe it or not, that we found 6 other labs that are capable of doing this that are not branded as Eurofins. So we are not in cahoots with Eurofins. That's not our agenda, and there are other labs. If you don't like Eurofins, go to these other 6, and there's probably more than 6. We haven't exhausted our searching But that's what we found, is that there's at least 6 other labs out there. And by the way, there's not going to be that much testing going on. The feed regulators aren't pulling bags off the shelf every day of the week and sending in material to be tested. The reason a food regulator would do that would be because there's some sort of complaint about the ingredient, or about how an animal is being affected by an ingredient. That would be when a regulator would step in. Regulators aren't sitting there on the hemp seed meal line, testing every batch of hemp seed. Right. That's not how it works. And then concern number 4, multiple passes through cleaning equipment and extraordinary measures will need to take place in order for processors and or farmers to meet these cannabinoid limits. And that, again, is a false statement. How do we clean the seed? We've got samples from multiple different processing facilities, so there's not necessarily one method, but it's highly standardized. I&D, for instance, they run through a screen cleaner and then they run through an air cleaner. That is a pretty standard process for cleaning seeds. That is not something exceptional. There are seed cleaner. Look, I actually sell seed cleaners as one of the things that we do in our implement business. And there are enterprises. And there are seed cleaners out there that are both screen and air, that do both things at one time. So that is, and that came about long before hemp seed was even thought about. There's a lot of different seeds that have to be cleaned when you're going into organics. And that's why we got into the seed cleaning market to begin with, is because of organic crops that some of our local farmers were raising, and the need to have clean seed. We're not cleaning hemp seed more so than organic farmers are cleaning their seed. And no one is in the organic industry is throwing a fit about cleaning seed, at least that I know of. That's not something that I hear. They just consider that part of the process. So those would be the main concerns that are towards us.
All right, thanks for sharing those. All right, so the vote is August 7th. And I mean, how do you imagine that goes down? Like, people come into a room, they write something down, they vote, and then they leave. Like, how will the news be put out there? When will you know whether you've passed or failed this?
Well, according to the agenda, and granted, I've never been to an AAFCO meeting, and something I should tell you is that I am now a member of the AAFCO Ingredient Definition Committee.
Oh, congratulations!
We didn't really put out any news about that, but I've been part of that group for about 90 days now.
Okay.
And what it says is that at 8:30 in the morning, there was a business meeting, and that is an open session for AAFCO members to formally vote on recommendations from committees and the AAFCO board of directors. And that lasts until 9:45. So within an hour and 15 minutes, we're going to know the answer in an open forum.
Okay, that's exciting. That's August 7th. All right. Okay, so hypothetical situation, you get a no vote. What's plan B?
Well, that's a real challenge, right? So unfortunately, if we go to the AAFCO chart, plan B puts us back at the beginning of the process.
No.
Yeah, so there's not really a plan B. The plan B is run up the hill again.
Yeah, so being undermined by some, international groups and some, domestic groups that you even, the people involved, that's just got to be so frustrating. And I hope that doesn't happen. I hope this turns into a yes vote, because that's what the industry needs to crack it open. So let's move away from the hypothetical no vote. Let's go to the hypothetical yes vote. What happens after that? Do you immediately start working on the amendments, or what happens after the yes vote?
Well, then we have to decide what we want to do, because we're still in the same predicament. It's not like we can go back and change the FDA's opinion. The FDA still believes that this is a viable product, the way that it sits. We've gone through 2 rounds of votes with people that believe that this is viable. So I think that there's going to be a lot of questions as to how we proceed, because the goal can't be to proceed in a way that makes everybody happy. We're not going to make everybody happy. I don't know what the criteria of that would even be. The goal is to produce a animal feed ingredient that is safe for the animals, that's safe for humans, and meets the FDA requirements. And since we're ticking all 3 of those boxes, I don't know the answer. I think we have to go back and analyze as to what to do. I mean, who's to say that we tick these boxes and the group that's against this is still against whatever we achieve? I don't know. First off, I don't think that's giving too much power to a group of people. But the reality is, fear does cause people to make decisions that they might not make otherwise. And a lot of the information that's been shared has been very fearful.
Which is why shining a light on what's happening there is important.
Correct. I would agree with that.
Yeah. All right. So a no vote puts you back in the beginning. A yes vote, still lots of work to do. So it's not like on August 8th, chickens across America can now have 20% hemp cake in their food?
Yes and no. So what happens after the vote is the definition becomes what they call tentative. And it sits in this tentative definition state for approximately a year. States and regulators have the ability to move forward with ingredients that are in the tentative definition place. So you might have states that have reservations, or regulators that have reservations that say, look, we're not interested in this until it moves out of tentative into fully, I guess, what do they call it? Until it's actually in the ingredient definition book. But there will be a number of states that are going to proceed forward. So there are going to be places on August 8th that will, presuming this passes, will start selling commercially.
Okay. Cool. So, Andrew, Bish, what other lessons have you learned from this whole journey you've been on here?
Well, that's a great question. I think that when we're trying to do something that is profound, it is difficult. I think when we went about this, we knew that there was going to be some level of difficulty, and we knew that the challenge was lots of science. What I learned was this. I don't know if I learned this, but it became very obvious that the politics and the way that this industry works together is not healthy for the industry as a whole. And you can look across the industry outside of the feed ingredient definition and see this. And I would say that the thing that's sticking out to me is just how divided we are as an industry. That would be the thing that I realized. I've always thought of it in terms of we're not really united in the way that there's so many different groups. But not being united and being divided, I think, are two different things. And what I'm seeing in this industry is that we are divided, and there are large divisions. It's a difference between just not being united, and those are two different things, and that's what we are. And that has become glaringly obvious. You look at the Miller Amendment relative to cannabinoids, that speaks to the division that's occurring in the industry, and the way that the legislators are pushing back against the industry because of how the industry has conducted itself. So I would say that that's my biggest takeaway, is the level of division and the level of divisiveness that is occurring. Yeah, that'd be my takeaway.
Can you offer any, I don't know, what's the word, salve, like anything to, like a balm, anything to bring us together in this hemp industry? Or like, are those divisions that you speak
I don't think
of?
people want to be together. I don't think that that's in the agenda. Actually, I think that there are, unfortunately, individuals out there that do want to see good people fail. And I'm not, put the Hemp Feed Coalition aside. I don't see where there's not enough coming together to support people that are doing the right things right now. And I think that there is a level of greed in this industry that is more important than having the entire industry rise up together. I think individual interests right now are trumping industry interests. And because we don't have a united front in this industry in terms of association organization, we're continuing to have that. And I think it's very unfortunate. And like I said, this goes well beyond the Hemp Feed Coalition. There's just doesn't seem to be, and that's not everybody. I know a lot of great people in this industry, right? Yeah. The problem is the great people in this industry are not as numerous as the profiteers are currently. And we need to have more people out to do the right thing versus out to make a buck. And you can tell that because just in my local town, the number of stores selling THC illegally is incredible. Yeah. I'm not against people buying and selling THC, but this is all illegal behavior that's happening in Grand Island, Nebraska.
Right. It's unregulated, it's unsafe products, nothing's tested. Like, why would you even buy that stuff?
No, it's very frustrating.
So the divisions you're talking about, I wonder if that's like a reflection of, what is it, the 25,000 uses of the cannabis plant? Like, there's just so much opportunity in this one plant that you've just seen these different sort of factions develop around the different parts of the plant. I don't know. I'm a hemp philosopher today.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's driving all of it, because I try not to contemplate what causes people not to do the right thing. I'm more focused on how I can do the right thing. So it's kind of elusive to me because it just, like, my brain just doesn't
go there.
I don't conspire against others naturally. That's not something that I find myself engaging in. So it's hard for me to go in there and speculate as to what the motivation behind all of this is. And again, I do understand the Canadians. I'm not going to say that the Canadians are out there, trying to that they're a part of this. I think the Canadians are actually more on our side than they are against us. We just have a couple, key points that we're not quite agreeing on. But that's not where the problem is in the United States with the hemp industry. The Europeans have nothing to do with the problems in the United States and the hemp industry. The problems with the United States and the hemp industry are Americans, the American profiteers. I mean, that's the reality about it. And again, that's not every hemp farmer. That's not every hemp producer. That's not every CBD supplier. But there's a number of people that are profiteering right now that are ultimately, while they're helping themselves or they're helping maybe somebody else in the industry, they're actually keeping the industry itself from growing by employing that tactic.
Right. And I think there's other industries who are, centered on profits that are looking at the cannabis plant to bring them more profits, right? I don't know. That's probably a whole other conversation. Let's bring it back to hemp seed meal. Andrew Bish, it is great to talk to you. I appreciate your perspective. We didn't really do an introduction. So, hey, welcome to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. Could you give us a quick intro?
Yeah, my name is Andrew Bish. I'm the president of the Hemp Feed Coalition. I also happen to be the chief operating officer of Bish Enterprises, located in Giltner, Nebraska.
Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that I did not ask you about?
One of the things that I think is important to note is that the Hemp Feed Coalition went to all of the current active processors in the United States, hemp seed meal processors or hemp seed oil processors. And I do have a document right here. Again, I'm going to send this to you, Eric. But this is a signed document from every single organization that we could find that commercially produces hemp seed meal or hemp seed oil, supporting the Hemp Feed Coalition's application for egg-laying chickens to eat hemp seed meal.
Cool. And that's a letter that you submitted to AAFCO?
Yes, that letter has been submitted to AAFCO. And
All
I think
right,
that's important because it speaks to the faith that the industry has that the Hemp Feed Coalition is doing the right thing. And I want to be clear that some of these producers recognize that some of their product is not going to be able to achieve the standards that the FDA are asking for, but they do recognize that the majority of their product will be received. And that is another avenue for them. And that's just one step in this process, because egg-laying chickens is not the end-all be-all of where we're going here. Egg-laying chickens is just the beginning.
Just the beginning. Yeah. So this application going to AAFCO, getting voted on the 7th, what is there like an overall benefit to agriculture?
Yeah, so I think that's what's really exciting, because for me, getting involved with the Hemp Feed Coalition was always about farmers. It was always about a rotational crop opportunity for farmers. And growing 20,000 acres of hemp in the United States is not a true rotational crop opportunity. Egg-laying chickens is 670,000 needed acres of hemp just to satisfy 5% of the egg-laying chicken population. But that's not a big number. When you look at it and we start to add in beef cattle and broiler chickens, now we're talking about needing over 7 million acres. That is a true rotational crop opportunity. That's a big deal. That's a big deal for corn farmers. That's a big deal for soybean farmers. That's a big deal for wheat farmers. And that's why, for me, I'm involved with this organization, and that's what I'm trying to accomplish, is rotational crop opportunities.
All right, now we're going to hear my conversation with Joe Hickey. He is a hemp pioneer, an activist, and business leader from Kentucky. He was one of the signers of the Red Flag Letter, which is published on the show page for this episode at lancasterfarming.com. So if you want to check out what I'm talking about, go see it. But I love talking to Joe. I value his perspective. Keep in mind that this is just me holding a microphone up to a speakerphone, so it's not super great quality audio, but what Joe has to say and how he says it totally make up for any sound issues. All right, so here's Joe Hickey.
I'm recording now.
Okay.
All right, so I am, very excited that the hemp grain is about to be approved, or hopefully is going to be approved for livestock feed for laying hens, right? And I know there's a lot of talk, there's politics between the international organizations and, the Hemp Feed Coalition here is pushing through this thing with the limits. There's a lot of talk about the limits are just too low. And I see your name on a letter that was sent to AAFCO. AAFCO shared these letters with me. And so I'm curious about this organization called the National Hemp Growers Association. Can you talk about that and your involvement in it?
Well, it was the group of people that, I mean, I guess you can look on the website and you might talk to I'm going blank right now. But anyway.
Tillery?
Tillery would be fine. But
yeah.
Basically, it's, there's not a representative that's specifically just for farmers.
Okay.
And so the idea was, to do something that's going to represent the farmers in the industrial hemp industry specifically.
Okay.
So that's the impetus for it. And, I've heard that it was started just to, as a way of, protesting against the 2 ppm standard and everything.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the case, because it was already, in process before that came up. The idea had already been hatched. But anyway.
Wait. Go back. What do you mean there?
We had already met and talked about forming the national before all this
I see. Okay.
came up. So it wasn't something that came up just to
for this,
to lobby against this, because I'm not against it.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, Eric, and I don't know if you've seen my LinkedIn post or not, but
about government overreach. I have. Yeah.
With that too, but both sides of this, the 2 ppm, albeit is a ridiculous, unattainable, well, I say unattainable, but, they say that there's some equipment somewhere that can measure down to 2 ppm.
Yeah.
But it's ridiculous. I mean, the 2 ppm, I think, is going to be sticking the foot in the door, so we can say, we can do this.
Yeah.
And then we can start working on cattle and everything. And I think it's a good thing in a way, because it kind of lays the groundwork for the future when it is economically feasible.
Yeah.
Once we're growing, millions of acres. And, the other side is, let's don't do this, because we're setting a precedence. And once you set that, as the 0.3 THC in the Farm Bill, which is a totally arbitrary number, we're trying to get it to 1%, where we can start using some of these breeding stock that's above 0.3 that has some great attributes to it, but we can't access that now because of the 0.3 level.
Yeah.
And a lot of farmers have lost their crop because of an ambiguous number that was established with no scientific basis whatsoever.
Right.
Zero.
Yeah, no, I get that. And that's, it's related to this 2 parts per million thing. But I'm more curious about the Hemp Growers Association for a couple of reasons. Like, I keep coming back to that. Like, I've seen the letters from the Canadian Hemp Trade Alliance. I've seen the letters from the Federation of International Organizations and from Australia. But this letter from the U.S., a couple of things stick out at me. One, the website says hempfarmersofamerica.org. So I go there and it bounces me to...
the Texas Hemp Growers Co-op.
No.
What's it bounce you to?
No, it takes me to Hemp Farmers of America, which is a CBD, website to sell me CBD. So that's but that's the first thing.
Somebody must have hijacked it.
Well, it says hempfarmersofamerica.com, and it's a redirect. The other thing is, you've got Derek Doman listed here as treasurer, right?
I don't know a Derek Doman.
He's from Horizon Hemp Seeds up in South Dakota. I know him. I've talked to him a bunch of times. He was surprised to find his name on this letter.
Yeah, I don't know anything. I don't know anything about Derek.
Yeah, so I'm curious about that. I have a call in with him. I'm just trying to get to the bottom of it, because I totally agree that 2 parts per million is way too low. Like, yes, it should be 10. But I'm also concerned that like they've gone through a process, they're going through, it's the process, right? It's like how we keep our food safe.
No, they spent $300,000
Oh, yeah.
3 years doing all of this.
Right.
And so I'm not, I'm not against the 2 ppm.
Right.
And and at the same time, I think it's a ridiculous number that can't be met. I talked to a scientist that said, hell, the rotation of the Earth and the moon affect stuff down at 2 ppm in equipment.
Yeah.
And that's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's such a tiny number. It's impossible to get there.
Yeah.
But here's my issue.
To talk about all these other organizations and what they're doing and how they're doing it, we're convoluting what the real issue here is. And the real issue is this totally, absolutely, without any doubt, the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. You got the FDA that allows cigarettes to be put out. You get 500,000 people a year die from it. And they allow that to happen. Yeah. But something that doesn't hurt anybody, that actually helps people, they're trying to stop it.
Yeah,
That's
I'm with you.
issue.
You're preaching to the choir.
Try to go into any of these other issues like, these people do this and these people do that. What about these people?
Yeah.
That is crazy.
I'm with you on that.
We ought to be looking at why the FDA is trying to stamp down on the hemp feed of animals. And the other thing is it's not economically, and it won't be economically viable for years to come because hemp seed right now is too expensive to feed the chickens. Yeah. It will be in the future, and I think you ought to go ahead and try to get a reasonable limit set now. But this whole thing is about the FDA. It's not about the hemp growers. It's not about this group or that group or the other group. This is about the FDA.
So do you think the FDA...
We're letting the FDA kind of or divert our attention. Oh, and look at all these other guys. Well, they belong to this group or they belong to that group. It's absolutely ridiculous. We're arguing among ourselves over something that's so asinine that it drives me crazy.
Yeah, I'm with you on all of that. Let me say something. So do you think that the FDA is the one putting forth that 2 parts per million number? Yeah. Why do you think that?
Absolutely. Because AAFCO looks at them to say it was at 10 ppm. Mm-hmm. And then it got back down to 2 ppm because of the FDA. Yeah, the FDA is the one that's behind all this. It's not, AAFCO doesn't set that.
Yeah.
So trying to, and it's a disservice to have anybody start talking about organizations and they're against each other. And it's great. I love it, the fight, because it creates PR.
Yeah, well,
it creates this everybody's talking about it.
Right.
Which
so
is great.
Let me ask you another question. Hold on.
Okay.
All right. So this organization, that National Hemp Growers Association, it's a relatively new group. It's got a couple of red flags as far as I'm concerned as a journalist. But I'm curious, this letter seems to be written specifically to undermine the vote and to get the vote kind of sabotaged, or you're asking AAFCO to just raise the limits. And so to me, it feels like, not a great way to go about it. It seems like there had been other ways along this process to make these arguments made.
I agree with you.
So I'm just confused, and it just seems like there's something, what's the word? Surreptitious going on. Like someone's trying to pull a fast one.
Yeah,
and
but who? But who's really? But nobody's trying to pull a fast one. The only fast one that's being pulled on us is by the FDA.
Yeah.
This is not a fast one. We have differences of opinion.
Yeah.
People think that 2 ppm will get our foot in the door, which I agree with. And the other group's opinion is if you set it at 2 ppm, you'll pay hell to try to get it raised anything else. And I agree with that. So I think both sides are correct.
Okay.
But to pit everybody against each other and ignore what's happening in the real world with the FDA is absolutely counterproductive to what we're doing here.
Okay, well,
completely.
Yeah. So, do you feel like what I'm asking about this stuff is pitting the organizations against each other?
Yeah, I think it's counterproductive. I think you ought to be calling the FDA and ask them why they're setting at 2 ppm when you allow arsenic and lead and all these other things come in. And the only reason that they're even dealing with it is because hemp was, when it was illegal, when they grandfathered all this other stuff in, they didn't grandfather hemp in because it was illegal at the time. So that's how we got caught up in this whole thing.
Yeah.
And just because it was illegal until, when they're, before and during them establishing this grass certification.
Yeah.
And, we don't get it. But everybody's like, okay, well, look at this group. Well, what about, all this is crazy. We don't even need to be talking about these groups because each one of them is right.
Right.
But the right for the wrong reason.
Yeah.
We need to be looking at the FDA and why they're setting this 2 ppm that is totally the most asinine thing that I've ever seen in my life. It's well, you can tell by my tone and voice how
you feel.
agitated I am.
Yeah, tell me how you really feel, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is, why is everybody looking at these groups when they ought to be looking at the real problem? The real problem isn't that we're arguing or have opposite positions on this.
Right. There's a lot of common ground.
Positions.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to say there's some serendipitous, reason behind all this is crazy.
Well, I
it's
can't.
just strong opinions.
I just can't. Yeah, I know it's definitely a hot take for sure. I can't figure out why. Like, it seems like, I said the website goes to a CBD company. I'm just curious why. It feels like there's some CBD folks in on this. Like, why does this concern CBD farmers?
Well, look. I have an interest in a technology that is great for cannabinoids. It's great for infusing cannabinoids into oils, into healthy oils. So even though I have that interest in that, I'm not pushing for cannabinoids to be legal I'm not pushing any of that.
Yeah.
That's not going to help the majority of American farmers. It's going to be a niche market. It's going to be a great niche market for some people. But this grain and fiber is what is going to really make this industry take off. And it's the genie's out of the bottle. It's going to take off.
Oh, for sure.
It's not something that's not going to happen. It's how do we make it happen in a way that is going to be quick and expeditious for the farmers and for creating an industry that's going to support these farmers.
Amen to that, Joe.
All this other stuff is just noise. Everybody talks about hemp and you hear them say intoxicating hemp. There's no such thing as intoxicating hemp. What you have is intoxicating cannabinoids that are derived from hemp that is concentrated, and then they go through a process to extract out the THC after they concentrate, and they're going, oh, this is legal because it came from hemp.
Right.
And that's just absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
Hemp is grain and fiber, and it's not cannabinoids. Cannabinoid farmers need to have a license to grow cannabinoids if that's what they want. And farmers, leave those damn farmers alone. Let them go out there and grow their crops. And these farmers aren't looking. There's not going to be a big marijuana market out there. There may be a decent market for cannabinoids, but there's not. If you compare what the marijuana market's going to be with what the hemp market, the grain and fiber market's going to be for farmers, they pale. Marijuana pales in comparison to what industrial hemp's going to do.
That's the vision of the future I'd like to see too. Yeah, we're getting there.
Yeah, and it's going to happen.
Yep.
But what we don't need to do is to be having the FDA come in and going, 2 ppm, and then they lowered the CBD that they allow in there. Why are we even dealing with any cannabinoids at all when you're talking about industrial hemp?
Well, that's why this letter confuses me, because it does seem like it comes in from the cannabinoid side. That's what really confuses me.
Well, I can tell you it does, because I wouldn't have anything to do with it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have anything to do with it at all.
Okay.
And I signed on to that letter, but if someone would give me a letter to sign on to the other side, I'll sign on to the other side. I think both sides are right.
Yeah.
It's crazy to set it 2 ppm, but it's better to set it 2 ppm and get the industry started and then start a fight.
That's That's where that's what I want to do. I want to get this thing approved, get the market cracked open a little bit. And then what it does, once they vote yes on this, it validates the methodology that they used in all of this. And then that expedites every other animal group from there, right?
Well, the methodology that they're using, Eric, is a methodology that does not work with commercializing hemp seed in the long run. Because look, right now, hemp seed costs 20 or 70 cents a pound. Okay. And they say, well, we'll feed hemp seed. Okay. Well, there's no farmers are going to pay 70 cents a pound when they can buy corn and the other grains for a hell of a lot cheaper. And it's a great addition. It has the GLAs, the proteins and everything in there, which is great. But back when we had Kennex, it was after Kennex, when Sean Crew was doing Hemp Oil Canada. He started off, he was crushing the seed and selling the oil, and then he was just piling up these super sacks with the hemp meal that was the crush.
The cake,
and it was just packing up. And we went up there and we were buying it for 5 cents a pound, bringing it back to Kentucky. And we started these guys that started the hemp fed beef company, and we were feeding it to that, and it was antibiotic, steroid, and hormone free. But they were selling the beef and making great money. But all of a sudden, Sean realized he could crush that and filter it or screen it and get the protein out of it. He was making more money out of the protein than he was the oil.
Yeah, right.
So
that's cool.
To say that it's economically viable right now that's not true.
Well, no, it's not true because it's still illegal. It has to be, approved, and then they can start developing.
If today they raise it to $1 million out of $1 million, if they raise it to 1% and allowed 1% in the seeds, which was never happened. I mean, it would never get up there.
Yeah.
But if let's just, for argument's sake, say they did, how many farmers are going to pay 70 cents a pound, and who's going to grow that much to feed, 1 million or 10 million or 100 million chickens? I forget how many chickens are out there. But it's just not economically feasible until we raise enough to bring the price down and saturate the market with the oil and the protein powder. And then once you have the fines, the stuff that's left over, that doesn't have the value that this other does, now you can start the industry up.
Yeah.
But prior to that, I'm in the midst of writing this article, Tempest in a Teapot.
Yeah. Oh, don't worry. This is going to be a podcast.
I think I'd love to see it be a podcast.
Good. All right. Well,
I'd like to see you just put this on the podcast.
Well, I'm going to.
Nobody's listening to it. It's crazy because everybody's going, well, these guys, why are they against this? Or why would they do this? Or these guys signed a letter to do that. Why aren't we going to the FDA and going, what in the hell are you guys doing?
Well, I've got a list of questions here. Listen, I've got questions and I've got an open line of communication with AAFCO. So, yeah, I'm going down my list. But that's what I'm doing.
Well, throw FDA in there.
Yeah, they're a little harder to get on the horn, but I've got AAFCO.
Yeah, but and ask AAFCO where the science is behind it.
Behind the 2 parts per million.
Yeah, where's the science at? There's no science behind that. Just like there's no science behind the
0.3,
in the farm bill. There's absolutely no science added at all.
Yeah.
And here you got the FDA approving Zolox and all this other shit that is killing people. And now they want to jump in and say you can't have any THC because you know what 2 parts per million is?
A drop in the bucket.
It's about 2 inches in 23 miles.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, and you think about glyphosate and how that's in all of our food, and that's a poison. Yeah.
And where's the FDA on that?
Yeah.
Why are they going after something that has absolutely great health benefits in all aspects of the cannabis plant? Why are they going after it? Are they protecting the pharmaceutical industry? Because who runs the pharmaceutical industry? All these heads of the FDA, if you look back, where did all those guys go to when they left the FDA? They went to the pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah, talk about a circular economy, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
I imagine if I keep this up, I'll be on their hit list, because they don't want hemp to be normalized, because all of a sudden, once it's normalized, they're going, well, if hemp doesn't hurt anybody and its counterpart, cannabis, marijuana, is legal in 23 states, well, what are we going to do here? We can't put the genie back in the bottle, but let's just slow it down.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. They'd have less work to do if they just eased up, right?
Well, yeah. Why are they spending all the money and the manpower on something that has absolutely no harm? You don't find 500 million people dying every year from doing it. And if there was a big epidemic on THC poisoning, all these old hippies will be dying left and right.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So,
hey, I think we will leave it there, but I think we agree, and I appreciate. Yeah, and I appreciate you taking my questions, with candor and being open about it.
All right, so that's Joe Hickey. Our conversation came to an abrupt end because the UPS guy knocked on my door and my dog started barking. So anyway, I love to talk to Joe. I value his perspective. I totally agree with what he says about the FDA. I don't really agree with him when he says that what I'm doing by talking about the red flags of this letter is creating divisions in the industry. No, I'm just highlighting that there are divisions and we got to figure it out because it's not a good look, right? We'll just leave it there. All right, so that does it for me today. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your patience. I've been keeping a strange summertime podcasting schedule. It's looking like every other week lately, but I'm doing my best. This story especially just gave me a lot to think about, and I did not want to rush this, and I didn't. So anyway, I am grateful to all of you for listening and for all the work that you're doing out there in the world. My name is Eric Herlock. I am the senior digital editor at Lancaster Farming Newspaper, the greatest agricultural newspaper in the world. Check us out online at lancasterfarming.com. And there will be links to the AAFCO courses that were mentioned in the beginning, how you can learn more about the feed ingredient process. We'll have some links to Hemp Feed Coalition documents that Andrew mentioned. And like I mentioned a couple times, I have links to all of those letters that were submitted to AAFCO. So all right, until next time, I will see you in the newspaper. This episode of the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast is copyright 2024 by Lancaster Farming Newspaper, part of the Steinman Communications family. Today's show was written and recorded, edited and produced by yours truly, Eric Herlock, and the music you hear throughout the show is courtesy of Timber Shadow.
Industrial hemp.